Today's episode is more scary stories from first responders to beach sounds. So hopefully it's enjoying and a little spooky. Let's go.
As a police officer, I often blame a particularly busy or crazy night on a full moon, or some other natural event that old wives will swear invoke abnormal behavior. But don't even get me started on Halloween. Just the whole month of October in general. I'm not even going to go there. Truthfully, I never put much stock in old superstition, but it helps combat the struggle of dealing with chaos on those nights when it seems the world has lost its mind. A light-hearted twist on human behavior, if you will. But as far as wholeheartedly trusting in the supernatural, no, that's not me. Not until one night in late June. My partner and I were 7 hours into a 12-hour shift, sitting in the cruiser and finishing another chilled cup of bagged coffee. It had been an uneventful evening. I couldn't tell you why, but I vividly remember looking up into the sky and thinking about how empty it was. You live or work in the city long enough, and you get used to the starless nights. But there were no clouds, no fog, and no moon, just an empty black expanse of sky. Anyway, I don't know why I remember this in such great detail, but I do, and it unexplainably gives me the creeps even still. We were in an area of development that night. New buildings and refurbished buildings were all up and down the street. Construction was everywhere, which meant vandalism in this area was likely and happened often. We had just finished what passed for coffee and a meal when dispatch sent out an alert. One of those remote security companies had called 911, alerting police that an alarm, possibly an intruder, had been set off in the upper levels of a nearby office building. We were only about a block away. We let dispatch know we would be responding to the call. "Copy that, officer. I'll let the caller know a unit is responding." Dispatch clicked off. "On our way," my partner spoke into the radio. "Officers, the caller has informed you they are contacting a key holder. Please wait for key holder's access before entering premises." Dispatch clicked off once more, and my partner radioed a quick response of acknowledgement. "I sure hope the intruder waited for the key holder before heading inside." My partner rolled his eyes. "Oh, I'm sure they did. Everyone knows manners first and all that." The deadpan that night was heavy in the air. It had been an incredibly quiet and slow shift. Arriving at the given address, we got out of the cruiser and assessed quickly there didn't seem to be any obvious signs of a break-in. The refurbished building, according to what I'd heard, and what the offices listed on the newly installed sign said, it housed mostly doctors' offices and a pharmacy. According to the information we had been told, the alarm had been triggered in one of the empty upstairs offices. We both continued to look around the building as we waited for the key holder to arrive. Inside the building was completely dark. There did not appear to be any lights on inside at all. We walked around the building and never saw any signs of a break-in or a disturbance of any sort. Coming back around to the front of the building, there was a man waiting by the front door. He was of average height, looked to be middle-aged with thick, graying chestnut hair that was parted to the side and a neatly trimmed beard. He had brown, forgettable eyes and wore slacks and a dark button-up shirt. He seemed to be the kind of guy anyone could describe, and yet was so memorable as to be utterly unrecognizable. He could have been anyone, anywhere. He was friendly enough, however, especially given the late hour. He held a keyring in his right hand and waved to us as we walked up to him with his left. "Good evening, sir." My partner and I both greeted him. "Good evening, officers." And without further prompting, he turned and unlocked the office building doors. He strode over to a switch behind the reception desk and flipped on a few of the lobby lights. The alarm was triggered on the top floor, the empty offices up there. He leaned against the desk. To the left was the elevator, and to the right the stairs. We first opted to take the stairs, but the door marking them as such was locked. "Do you mind opening this up for us, please, sir?" I asked the man. He continued to lean against the desk. He hadn't moved since he parked himself there. "Don't have the key to that door. The elevator should work," he said, his back to us. I looked at my partner to confirm that this was strange. Judging by the questioning look on his face, he agreed. We walked to the other side of the desk and hit the up arrow. The elevator dinged and opened immediately. I glanced over at the man. He was still standing there staring out the front windows, as though he was lost in thought and completely alone. Weird. Inside the elevator, I began to get a weird feeling, but I just chalked it up to too much caffeine and the interaction with the key holder. Doesn't seem like this is turning into anything at all. Probably just a fault in the security system, or a mouse. My partner is not a small man. In fact, the last time he was described as small was likely when he was in kindergarten. He spends his free time at the gym and is all around just a scary-looking dude. He's a great officer, though, and I've always appreciated having him at my back. While a nice reprieve from the chaos, calls like this were boring and not what we wanted to be doing. Probably, but we still have to check it out. You never know. The elevator dinged open to reveal another waiting room lobby area. This top floor was completely dark, except for a minuscule amount of light coming from the only hallway. At first, I thought it was just light coming from a window at the end, but it couldn't have been that. There was no moon. We pulled the issued flashlights from our belt and began to do a more thorough search. The waiting room was obviously empty. There was not much to it. Several chairs lined the hallway, and 2 coffee tables sat off center. The reception desk was empty of anything and everything. This floor did not appear to be currently in use. We cautiously walked to the darkened hall, where all the exam rooms and offices were located. There was a single flickering overhead light fading in and out of clarity at the very end of the hallway. Every horror film I'd ever seen came into mind as I looked at that light. My partner, unlike his usual sarcastic self, said nothing as we proceeded down the hall to the first door in the hallway. I checked the knob and found it locked. My partner checked the door directly across from the door I checked. We found it locked as well. 2 doors down, 6 more to go. We methodically checked each door, and each time we found it to be locked. The last door to be checked was at the very end of the hall and sketchily illuminated by the ever-flickering overhead light. My heart was pounding in my chest. An irrational fear had settled into my nerves. My partner checked this last door and expected it to be locked, same as the others. But that was not the case. The knob twisted down and released its hold on the jamb, silently gliding into the dark room. Steeling ourselves for confrontation, we took a deep, calming breath and entered the room. We examined the room with our flashlights, carefully and scrupulously taking in the details of the abandoned office. A simple wooden desk sat directly in front of the shut and locked windows. A calendar from several years ago was still under the protective glass that covered the desktop. A jar of black pens sat on the corner, and a half-used notepad was resting in front of the jar. A tall metal file cabinet was placed in the 2 back corners of the office. 2 doors were side by side to the right of the office. In one, we found nothing. It appeared to be a small coat closet. In the other was a bathroom. Again, nothing in there aside from the toilet and the sink. The offices didn't yield any signs of an intruder or that anyone had been there for years. "Can you see anything that would indicate why the alarm was triggered?" I asked my partner. "No, let's get out of here. It was probably a glitch or something in the system." He was already heading for the door. I followed right behind him and almost plowed into his huge frame as he dead stopped in the doorway. The ever-flickering light was no more. It had gone completely out, but the light above the elevator shone bright and steady. Across from the door we stood was another door, a door that had been locked tight just a moment before, a door that was now standing wide open. I heard the swallowed fear as my partner gulped and stepped out into the hall. I was right on his heels. I stepped around to stand behind him and was immediately met with an unnerving sight. Each and every door we had just checked and found to be locked was standing open. Every single one. At this point, training overrode fear and nerves. We began to check inside each of the now open doors. These were doors to exam rooms. Each one was empty. Not even the exam beds were left inside. We left the doors as we found them, open. The last door standing open was to another office. This one was empty. No personal bathroom or closet, just an empty desk. Still, we walked inside just to be sure. The moment we were both inside the office, our radios blasted a high-pitched, ear-piercing static that about drove us to our knees. In the hall, we heard a door slam shut with such force, I was sure it would have splintered. I can't tell you who was out of the door first, but my partner's long legs got him to the elevator first. The doors dinged and opened on the first push of the call button. We were inside and hurriedly pushing the door's close and lobby button. In the lobby, the elevator let us out without incident. "Where is that key holder? I have some questions for him." My partner was not having this experience. He was clearly shaken. I know I was too. The key holder was nowhere to be seen. We walked outside to see if he had stepped out, but he seemed to have vanished. He just left us here. What's going on with this place? I wondered out loud, needing to hear something, even if it was my own voice. "I'll contact dispatch, explain what is going on and get the number to the key holder." He did that, and as I listened to the exchange between him and the dispatch, I grew increasingly more uneasy. "Officer, the key holder should have been arriving in 5 to 10 minutes. The security company had difficulties contacting the key holder on call. The woman at dispatch was clearly annoyed. She probably thought she was being pranked. "Dispatch, we have been inside for over 20 minutes. We were just with the guy." My partner was struggling to keep the calm in his voice. "That's impossible, officer. I'm telling you, the key holder was only reached a few minutes ago. They are still en route to the building." Dispatch clicked off, leaving radio silence. We decided to continue waiting outside for the en route key holder. A few minutes later, a small dark blue car pulled into the parking spot immediately behind our cruiser. It shut off, and out of the driver's door stepped a young woman. She was dressed in jeans and a hoodie, and looked like she had just rolled out of bed, clearly bothered to be up out this late. "Good evening, officers. Sorry about the wait," she said as she came toward us holding a big round keyring. "Good evening, ma'am. Another key holder already let us inside. We didn't see any signs of intrusion, tampering, or vandalism, but it does seem like there could be a glitch or malfunction in the system," I explained as she came to a stop in front of where we stood. "What? I'm the one on call. I'm the only one with the building keys right now." She was obviously confused and a little frustrated. "A man met us here about 30 minutes ago." I went on to describe how he looked and how he left without saying anything. The more I explained, the more blood drained from her face. "He sounds a lot like..." She paused and looked around uncomfortably. "He sounds a lot like one of those doctors who worked here several years ago. I had just started, but I remember because he committed suicide." Again she paused, this time crossing her arms, and took a ragged breath. "He jumped out of his office window." Chills shot up my spine. Judging by my partner's reaction, I think the same must have happened to him too. Neither of us ever told anyone about that call. There was no explanation immediately at my disposal, scientific or superstitious. Supernatural, maybe, but I can't bring myself to dive too deeply into that realm of possibility. I was on duty one night, working at the police station's front desk, when a call came through from an elderly woman. The line took a moment to stabilize, and at first, all I could hear were short, ragged gasps coming from the speaker. After a couple of seconds, a woman's voice came through. It had the same low, wheezy quality as the breathing, and it was clear she was struggling to speak. She asked me if I had the number for the local doctor, each word coming out with a painful gasp. It was clear this woman was in pain. I asked if she needed an ambulance, but she refused, simply requesting the doctor's number again. Not wanting to upset her, I agreed to give her the number. I didn't have it on hand, so I told her to hold on for just a moment and put the phone down while I looked it up on my computer. When I picked up the phone again, barely half a minute later, the line was still open, but I could no longer hear anyone on the other side. The line was completely silent. "Hello? "Ma'am, are you still there?" I said, straining my ears to pick out any noises from the other side. I could no longer hear breathing. When I received no reply, I began to fear the worst. "Ma'am, if you're there, please say something. Make any sort of noise so that I know you're okay." I continued, my voice steadily rising in the hope she would hear me, even if she had somehow dropped the phone. I heard nothing but the soft crackle and hiss of the line. I switched to another line and hastily put a call through to the control room, requesting a trace on the woman's number. If she had collapsed, which I was convinced she had, then she would need emergency medical help, and at the moment, I was the only one who could get it to her. The control room team got back to me quickly with an address for the landline number, and I forwarded to the closest police and ambulance vehicles. In the meantime, I switched back to the ongoing call with the woman, trying once again to reach her. "Ma'am, can you hear me? There's help on the way. If you can hear me, please try to respond." The silence was heavy on the other side, but I was still reluctant to hang up the call just in case she recovered consciousness and needed someone to calm her down. I listened out for even the smallest sound, almost holding my breath, but the whole time there was nothing beyond that dreadful silence. I stayed on the line until the police arrived at the house. In the distance, I could hear someone banging on the door, and then the voices of the police announcing their presence. At that point, I had figured it was okay to hang up since the ambulance and police crew had reached the woman. There was no longer anything I could do on my end but wait and hope the ambulance had got there in time to help her. It was only afterwards that I learned what had happened after I'd hung up. When the police entered the house, they found no immediate sign of the woman. They called out to her, but like me, received no reply. They found the landline off the hook on the living room table, but there was no sign of whoever had placed the call. One of the officers remarked that the place seemed oddly untouched, as though nobody had lived there for some time, given the amount of dust on the surfaces and the general smell of mildew lingering about the place. The police continued to do a full sweep of the house, checking every single room and calling out for a response, but they quickly concluded there was nobody there. The house had been completely vacant upon their arrival. It was only a short while later, when the ambulance turned up, that one of the crew informed the police they had recognized the house. They had been called out to it 3 weeks prior after a woman had complained of chest pains and difficulty breathing. The sole occupant of the house, an elderly woman who had been widowed for a few years, had died of a heart attack in her own living room. By the time the ambulance had reached her, it had been too late to do anything. Hearing that sent a chill down my spine. I felt suddenly dizzy as I recalled the woman's voice on the line, asking for the doctor's number. Why hadn't she asked for an ambulance straight away? But if there was anybody at the house, or ever had been, then who had put in that call? It hadn't been fake, since the control room team had traced it directly to the landline of the woman's residence. But I still vividly recall the struggling gasp as the woman struggled to breathe while she was speaking to me. It was just like the heart attack victim who had died 3 weeks earlier in the exact same house. The similarities were unnerving, yet the thought I was entertaining was impossible. It couldn't have been the same person, not when the woman had already passed away, and the house should have been empty. I dreaded to consider the possibilities that what I had witnessed was something paranormal. But even now, I can't shake away the feeling that the woman who had called me really hadn't been at the house. That whole time, the house had been empty, and that what I'd heard was some kind of phantom echo of a woman at the end of her life.